Namaha. My name is Raja Chowdhury, and I'm here in an unusual role because I'm a student of consciousness, but from a very unusual perspective, from the psychological perspective of Tantra and Sri Vidya and Trika. And I started life as an architect in London, and I studied at the Architectural Association, and I became an architect, and then I became a digital creative director in New York, and I built kiosk networks and websites and all kinds of wonderful things. And I became a filmmaker as well, and my films have been seen all over the world. I'm producing a new film for PBS on the history of how Indian wisdom came to America. And but my parallel life has been an explorer of consciousness. And I came to consciousness accidentally. I'm what you could call an accidental mystic, though I'm probably an atheist. And the way I came to consciousness was that I discovered through hallucinogens and plant medicine a vast universe when I was about 28 years old. And this opened up a series of experiences for me that led me to begin to believe that if I was to pursue this inner training or inner shift in consciousness, I could expand my mind and I could discover portals into other states of being that were not ordinarily available to most people. And I'd seen them in the states of hallucinogenic states of consciousness, but that was not enough. And I took it upon myself because I'd come from a Kali and tantric background in my family, even though I'd been an atheist most of my life. And I started looking at the history of what is now we call Kundalini and Trika and Tantra. And I took initiations and I discovered a whole parallel life in my early 30s that led me to this point. And the study of Indian wisdom that I discovered was not religion. It was psychology and neuroscience. And what I realized very early on that was that the ancient seers and seekers and rishis of India were actually experimenting with consciousness. And if you look back at the Rig Veda, you see this idea of the elemental, looking at nature, looking at the five elements, looking at wind and water, and then trying to see it internal to ourselves and the macrocosm and the microcosm within you. And so you can see these early attempts at psychology that were going on in 1500 BC and in the valleys of North India and South India. And then you find that we discover in the later stages through the Upanishads and Buddhism and Jainism, a psychological effort goes inwards and we start talking about that there is a vast consciousness behind the whole universe, almost like a panpsychic god of Spinoza that seems to be sitting there, who we are in the play of that divine mind. And the human effort is to free itself from this binds of karma and body and physical limitations to go towards that mind. But then something very unusual happens in India around the 4th and 5th and 6th centuries AD. A series of experiments begins to happen at the fringes of Indian society, outside the main Brahminical and city civilizations and Buddhist civilizations. And these dialogues, these experiments are what we today call Tantra. There was a series of books and treatises written called the Agams that led to a kind of dialogue between, very strangely, between the human being, the human body, the human consciousness, the human limited consciousness, and the potential of that vast consciousness that seemed to surround all human beings, that they seemed to feel that we were part of something bigger collectively or in nature or at the source. And these dialogues came to be known as Tantra, what we now know as Tantra. And this was a vast experiment that happened at the fringes of Indian society. And still, if you say the word Tantra in India, it's considered to be extremely fringe. And it includes Shaktiism, the worship of the sacred feminine, Shiva, the cults of Trika. All of these are parts of this idea. So, what happened was that this great dialogue starts to happen. The early scientists or neuroscientists of India in the 5th, 6th centuries were exploring this idea that we were embodied consciousness, and the only way we could have an experience of the other was through expanding our own consciousness. And you can imagine that they did it earlier through soma and hallucinogens, and then through detachment from reality and the body through yoga and Buddhism and all these teachings and Upanishads and Maya and the illusion of life. And then you get to this point where the body becomes sacred. We actually can awaken and expand our consciousness in the body. And this is where Tantra comes into being. And in particular, there was one set of writings called the Rudra Yamala, where one particular teaching was written called the Vijnana Bhairav Tantra, where body, Shakti, energy, matter, particles, neurons, the brain, the being, is having a conversation with the extent of human consciousness, what lies beyond. And they call this dialogue the dialogue between Bhairavi, the sacred feminine of energy and matter that seems to run our lives and everything in the whole universe, all the particles, all the waves, everything that's going on is called Bhairavi, and Bhairav, or sometimes called Shakti and Shiva. And Bhairav, which is a wonderful word, and if any of you have been to Tibet or Nepal or Bhutan, you always see this kind of ogre teeth, kind of fierce, monstrous looking character called Bhairav. And Bhairav literally means the gatekeeper at the limit of human consciousness. That means that if I stand at the precipice of my senses, my being, all of these things, and I come to the edge, if I am about to fall off that edge, the experience of that terror, yet that awe and curiosity is called Bhairav. So the dance is between me, little me with my consciousness, my senses, my fantasies, my illusions, my limited nature of observation that I have, and the edge of consciousness, which I might just fall into. And if I can have that dialogue, the tantrics believe that an entire universe of potentiality opens up for us. So I'm calling this the Conversations with the Void, and it's the name of a series of courses and books and things I want to do right now called the Conversations with the Void. And I want to share that with you because it has a lot to do with, a lot of dialogues going on today in panpsychism, in Spinozan theories of mind. And we need to consider the fact of the idea of a non-local consciousness not being necessarily the case here. What they were doing was they were expanding awareness and attention of human consciousness to a point where we came to a tipping point. And if we go over that threshold, we suddenly realize that we become an observer watching all consciousness being. This was the great revelation that occurred in Tantra, which is that I am both the observer and the particles and waves and being that is doing the actions that seem to be observed, looking up at that observer and reaching towards it. So the Vijnana Bhairav Tantra is a great dialogue. So the body, Bhairavi, Shakti, asks Shiva, asks Bhairav, what are you? When you close your eyes and meditate, what do you see? What lies beyond all these rituals and processes of being human, of my mind, my awareness, my dream state, my deep states of consciousness? is there. And so Bhairav, consciousness, is having a dialogue with Bhairavi. And instead of explaining what that is, Bhairav teaches her 112 haiku type little meditations to go into the void and become the observer. And that void they call the Turiya state. So what we have is that in the Indian psychology of Tantra and Yoga and Vedanta, this idea of four states of consciousness exists. The first state, called Jagrat, is all about the senses, the body, the biology. Jagrat means the waking state. That means that the world I perceive with my senses, my attention, my seeing, my hearing, my senses, all of this I create a construct of a reality around me. But I realize soon that that's not reality, that there is more that my consciousness is not perceiving at that level of vibration. And there's this whole other world I live in, which we call Swapna, 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 which means that the world I construct in my mind, the fantasies, the dreams, the future, the past, the memories, all of that, I'm never fully in the moment of attention observing phenomena. I am always in the future or in the past or in some fantasy. And then they say there's a third level of consciousness, which is kind of deep rest, tranquility, which is like sleep, deep sleep, where the mind stops chattering, the body stops overactivity, and I go into a kind of tranquility. And in that state, I begin to explore the expansion of my consciousness. So it's like a deep state of automatic being in a way. Now, the tantrics went further and they said there is a fourth level of consciousness called the Turiya state. And that Turiya state is that complete awareness, expanded consciousness, so that I push the boundaries of my ability of attention, of interconnection, of using my mind to perceive other realities. And this Turiya state, something happens in that Turiya state. I go into the void, this vast no thing, no mind, no state, shunya, the nothingness, and I become the observer watching reality. Then I become the creator, the designer, and I become beyond space-time observing my being, observing all being, and I dissolve into that vast nothingness. So for the past few years, I've been teaching, and for over 22 years, I've been doing this experiment. And I learned very quickly through many techniques of Kriya Yoga and Kundalini Tantra and Shakti to hack my consciousness and go into that Turiya state that allows me to become the observer, the shunya. And when I first had these awakenings, it was first very physical, and it was in the body. Something called Kundalini awakening occurs, and your spinal cord erupts into all kinds of activity, and you think you're going mad, but it's quite wonderful actually. Much better than any acid trip I ever had. But what I realized was that I was moving towards a vast expansion of my consciousness, of my mind. And I've seen it over the last 10, 15 years that my ability to learn, my ability to share, my ability to teach, my focus, my attention has expanded greatly. And so what I want to do is, and I've been doing this with the Shift Network for couple of years now, is I teach people how to enter that Turiya state, that vast nothingness. And I'm going to take you on a little trip just now for about 5-10 minutes where we'll explore some of the verses of the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra together. And I want you to relax. So relax and just sit with me as we work on coming to the Turiya state, this awareness state of consciousness in the void, where we become the observer. We're going to still our bodies, we're going to still our mind, and we're going to relax. And I'll read you the first verse of the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra that begins the whole journey for us. So the first verse goes, O Shakti, whose nature is breath, at the point you leave the heart and travel up, Saha. And at the point you enter and travel down, Hum. In that full state, become one with me. So as you can see from this diagram, there are two places. One is called the Dvadashanta, just above your head, like an entry portal for consciousness to come and go, and the vast external consciousness that you can tap into. And one is in your heart center called the Hridaya. And they're both 12 fingers up and down from your nose. So if you think about it, 12 fingers above is your portal, and 12 fingers below your nose is your heart center. So you want to imagine, just sit with me now, that you're going to bring in a kind of conscious energy by breathing in as if it's pouring into this little portal above your head. Hum is the sound you hear coming in. Hum. And sa is the breath going out. So as you bring it in, imagine pouring in wonderful consciousness into you from all around you. Hum. Turn it around at the heart center and release it back into the nothingness. Sa. Hum. And sa. Hum. And sa. So just don't try and say it, just hear it in your mind. Hum. The hum is like a nasal vibration of breathing in. And sa. If you imagine, when you breathe in, it's like a hum sound. And when you release, it's like a sigh going out. Sa. Hum. Sa. You can close your eyes and imagine it coming into the portal just above your head, called the portal of bliss, 12 fingers above your nose, coming into your heart center, turning it around, and sa, releasing it. Now in the next verse, we see that we stop the sound of hum and sa. Stay with me, just relax and stay relaxed. And again, coming in through the portal, it says here, in the space where your breath comes in and in the space where it goes out, focus your mind on those two spaces and the void will be revealed. So just relax and imagine there's a vast space above your head, like sky just above your head. And there's a wonderful lotus in your heart that's going to open, and we're going to breathe between the two. So you take the breath in. No hum inside, just bring it in from above, breathe it into your heart center, turn it around, and breathe it out. Again, in and out. In and out. In and out. And relax. So now the next stage is to hold it and observe the deep consciousness while you hold your breath. So the verse goes, after all the breath goes out, hold it out. After all the breath comes in, hold it in. And in those two states, experience peaceful bliss. It's called Shanta, peaceful bliss. And then absolute peace comes and I am revealed. That's Bhairav saying, I am revealed. So if you come back to me, just watch. Take a deep breath in from the portal above. Bring it into your heart center. Hold it there for as long as you can, maybe a count of 10, and just hold it and put your mind at the heart center. And now, after a count of 10, let it out. And this time hold it out just above your head, gazing upwards into your head. And bring it in and hold it at your chest. And you start feeling a kind of tingling, good feeling in your heart when you do this. A kind of bliss will begin to come. And now release it again. And you'll feel a vast sky forming above your head. Bring it in. And the longer you hold it, the more all thoughts will stop. You will go into a no thought state. And you'll start feeling a vast openness, as if you are observing a tranquility, an ocean of bliss, and you're just watching. Your body is stopping, your mind chatter is stopping, and you're just relaxed, and you breathe out and gazing up into the dome of your head, you just relax. Breathe in again. And hold it in your heart center and relax. So now I want you to breathe into your heart center, and I'll just guide you into how to experience the void. Just come into your heart center and sit with me and imagine that there's nothing in front of you, nothing behind you, nothing above, nothing below. Just close your eyes and experience that. And imagine that all there is this heart center and a kind of void there. And all your senses are collapsing into it. Your sound, my voice is collapsing into it. All the visions in your mind are collapsing into it. The smells, the feelings on your hand, on your face are all falling into it. And I want you to just relax and imagine that it's floating like a feather in your heart. And you're in this vast, tranquil space. No skin, no flesh, no bones, no nothing. You're just light as a feather. And you feel your heart tingling. And imagine that you're sitting in this vast space, the Turiya state. This is the taste of the void. And just by sitting in this state, your consciousness begins to expand. Your mind goes still, your body is still, and all you're feeling is a lightness in your heart. And just relax and observe the tranquility of this state. Now, I can't do all this today, but if you want to continue this state of consciousness, you can join me on one of my courses at the link below. And the most beautiful teaching of the Vigyan Bhairav, the most beautiful teaching of the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra says that in this state, in anything you do, walking or talking or laughing or working, move your mind to that heart center over and over again. And each moment then becomes a chance to be born again. So with each hum, you can be born again. With each sa, you dissolve. And so it's like being born, hum, and dying every breath. 21,500 times a day, breathing in, breathing out, and becoming aware that anywhere you look, you can sense this consciousness. You can just feel it. You can see it. You can see it everywhere. And the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra teaches us to hack our consciousness so that we become observers of our own consciousness in action. We transcend space and time and we begin to observe. So if you want to take this further with me, do join me at www.1000sunsacademy.com. And who knows where this could go. Namaha and blessings to all of you. Thank you.